Hi, I'm Aaron Tomlinson, and welcome back to the channel. I have a question for you. What does Copernicus, Bruno, Paracelsus, Descartes, Galileo, what do they all have in common? Well, they are the key names and the founders in the scientific revolution that began centuries ago. But something else that they all had in common is that they were all hermeticists. They were all alchemists, astrologists, or magicians in some way, shape, or form. You see, the scientific revolution did not begin with scientific materialism as its foundational philosophy. It began actually with Hermeticism as its foundational philosophy. The idea was that the exploration and discovery and observation of the physical world would lead to insights about the invisible world and how to effect change in the physical realm and physical dimension by learning about the hidden or occult or invisible dimensions of reality. So the scientific revolution didn't begin with the philosophy of scientific materialism. It began with the philosophy of Hermeticism, and its goal was to explore the nature of the universe in order to find the connections between the physical material world and the invisible world of spirit, or as the Hermetic principle goes, as above, so below. So if we can understand below, we can understand the above. Now, there were scientific materialists during that time that believed that this three-dimensional world is all that exists, that everything that exists, everything that can be known, is objective and located in three-dimensional reality and can be observed by our five physical senses. And of course, they pushed back. One thing they all had in common, whether they were materialists or they were hermeticists, they were all at war with the church view of God, the Roman Catholic Church, and all of those things. So there were socio-political reasons that scientific materialism rose to the forefront. And there was a divide back then between the materialists and the hermeticists who were studying science and giving birth to the scientific revolution. And the materialists, partly in just a determination to eradicate Roman Catholicism from society, that said that materialism is all that there is. And the names I just mentioned and others pushed back, the Hermeticists pushed back and said, well, you're not accounting for mind. You're not accounting for consciousness. You're not accounting for the logos or the great observer or the great mind that created the universe. And of course, the materialists pushed back, but when the Hermeticists said, well, you're not accounting for consciousness, we have the beginning of what today is known as the hard problem of consciousness. It goes all the way back to then. So what does this have to do, if anything, with the supernatural and opening up for yourself supernatural or paranormal or mystical experiences? Well, the truth is that the way we work as human beings, the way our brain works, this is just a basic of neuroscience, that we will only experience what we believe. In other words, if we are so committed to materialism and we are so committed to time and space and we are so committed to eradicating anything invisible, spiritual, paranormal, or supernatural, and that's our fundamental core belief, then we shut off any information, access to any information that might try to come to us or reach us from those invisible dimensions. Now, for Hermeticists, there are at least 7 planes of reality, of which materialism is only one plane. There are 6 planes above that. There is the astral plane, which relates to the emotions. There's the mental plane, which relates to mind. There is the causal plane, which relates to the cause and effect relationship between the seen and the unseen. And then there were 3 layers of spiritual reality believed to be in existence and part of our reality and part of the cosmos that were above those. Now, our problem is that our bodies are 3-dimensional, our physical bodies are 3-dimensional beings. They're 3-dimensional objects. They exist in this 3-dimensional world, and they get us around in this 3-dimensional world. So our physical senses are only able to perceive what exists in this 3-dimensional world. Now, if we just say that's it, what we can perceive with these physical senses in our body defines reality totally and completely, and there is nothing else, then that's all that we'll look for. That's all that we'll see. But let me give you a few examples that might kind of disprove that, where materialism begins to break down in the same way it did at the beginning of the scientific revolution. In fact, Rene Descartes, his famous maxim, "I think, therefore I am," was a refutation of scientific materialism. If you study it out, you'll see that. And I guess what bothers me is that for a lot of atheists, for a lot of scientific materialists, they act as though the conversation is over. There's no dialogue, there's no openness to the idea that there might be levels or planes of reality like the Hermeticists considered that we just don't have access to with our 5 physical senses. But we have to admit that sensory experience is not limited to our 5 physical senses, because every night when we go to sleep and we dream, something unusual happens. Our 5 physical senses go to sleep. Our body goes to sleep. But there's another part of us, and you can argue it exists in the brain, but Hermeticists would say that it exists in other bodies that we have that correspond with other planes of reality. But regardless, the experience for all of us when we dream is that our physical senses shut down, and when our physical senses are suppressed, the sensational reality does not cease. In other words, have you ever had a dream where you woke up and thought, was that a dream or was that real? Have you ever had an experience in life and said, is this a dream? I wish this was just a dream because maybe something terrible is happening. I wish this was just a nightmare that I could wake up from. So the reality is, when those physical senses go to sleep and they're suppressed, then other sensory organs, if you want to call them that, awaken, and we can experience taste, smell, feeling, sights, sounds in the realm of dreams. So we experience it almost every night. But that's not where it stops. The truth of the matter is that when people take things like psilocybin, or they take LSD, or they take other kind of psychedelic drugs, they will have waking dreams, if you will, or they will experience realities that are not present to the physical senses. They'll start seeing things, hearing things, experiencing things. Now, if consciousness came from the brain, then one would expect that when people have psychedelic experiences under brain scans, that their brains would light up, because the sensory experiences on psilocybin and LSD and things like that are oftentimes more intense, more enriched than the physical senses. But in fact, the opposite is true. What we discover under brain scans is that the brain becomes suppressed. The brain activity becomes less. It becomes suppressed. So again, when the physical senses become suppressed, then these other sensory experiences that are often more enriched and more dynamic begin to happen. The same thing happens with near-death experiences. People who self-report about near-death experiences talk about seeing colors that they had never seen on the earth, about having these vibrant, sensual, sensory experiences while the brain is less active and the physical sense organs are suppressed. The same thing is true. There are people, believe it or not, who practice asphyxiation or autoerotic asphyxiation in order to induce psychedelic experiences. And we know from scientific experiences, the same thing is true. When the brain gets quieter, when it gets less active, something is causing us to have greater sensory experiences, or the ability to see the unseen. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that experience in the spiritual, mystical realms, the spiritual planes, or supernatural experiences that we can bring into our lives require that we use other sense organs that can have sensory experiences while our physical senses are suppressed. Thus, one of the purposes, or one of the spiritual purposes and mystical purposes and paranormal or psychic experiences of the act of meditation. And so I just want you to consider this. I just want to throw this out here as food for thought for you, because I'm convinced that a real awakening, when we say I've awakened, I woke up, a real awakening is when your spiritual sense organs, or the sense organs that we have that can experience realms and dimensions that are beyond the material plane, or experience, as the Hermeticists would say, planes that go beyond our sensory perceptions, then those senses have to wake up. So in a very real sense, when we are stuck in a materialistic worldview and mindset, our spiritual selves are asleep. And so a real awakening happens. I mean, think about it. When your physical body goes to sleep, other sense perceptions wake up. So if we aren't having those other sense perceptions while we are awake in our physical bodies, then it just makes sense that those other corresponding aspects of ourselves that can sense and peer into these other dimensions are asleep. So real awakening it requires an awakening of spiritual senses. And then, much like a blind person who has never seen has to create cognitive and mental categories in the mental realm to understand the physical plane, in the same way, when we wake up spiritually, oftentimes we don't know what we're seeing with our spiritual sense organs. And so we need paths like Hermeticism, like Wicca, like shamanism, and in some cases like mystical Christianity or esoteric Christianity, to help us give categories in the mental realm to make sense of what we're seeing. And when we do that, then we can ascend into the causal realm, and we can begin to, through spiritual practices, bring change into the natural realm. So I hope this has been informative for you. I hope this has been beneficial for you. Let me know in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like, hit the notification bell so you know when I'm dropping new videos. Watch me live on Sunday mornings at noon Eastern Time, 10 a.m. my time, Mountain Time. And if you haven't joined the New Day Global Facebook page or Facebook group, private Facebook group, I'd encourage you to do that. The link is in my bio. Thank you for watching this to the end. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will be back with you again soon.